Hello guys, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about Artos test status. So Artos supports four different kind of test status. As you can see on the screen, those are pass, fail, skip and known to fail. This video is going to be continuation from the previous video. So if you haven't watched them, I highly recommend to refer to them first. So let's get started. Okay, so what we are seeing on the screen is the test project that we created in our previous tutorial. In that tutorial, we created a test runner and couple of test case with template, and I explained to you how different annotation works. So in this tutorial, we are going to look at test case 1 and see how we can set different test statuses. So test status is very important part of any test framework because that's the only way to communicate back to framework saying, hey, this test case actually passed or failed or did something bad, right? So let's start with status setting. So how do we set the status? So that's very easy with Artos. As you see, each unit actually takes the global context argument. So context lets you set the status, so you can say context set status and then use this enum defining the Artos, which lets you set one of these four. Set it can be pass, fail, known to fail or skip. So in this case I'm going to use pass, and you can provide some useful information. It could be data, could be description why it's pass, or some status update. So we can say test logic is good, right? So we are talking about setting test status and specifically about pass status. So let me give you some more detail on that as well. So pass status is not a compulsory status. So if I comment these out and execute this test case as it is, you will see that naturally test unit will pass regardless. So as you can see, the test unit outcome is pass, and that's why the test case also passed. But if you set it, what happens? So let's say if we explicitly set status to pass, you will see that there is a one line addition to the log. So let's look at that. You can see that your explicit statement has created this one more line, and the description you provided is also printed here. So it gives you an opportunity to provide status update on the log or in the report itself, and you can actually every step of the way in your test case you can actually provide past status, so you know that you actually passed this section of logic and I'm moving on to the next section. It also sets the status in the reporting. So let me show you the last report created. So if we go to the extent report, you can see that every time you explicitly set status, it actually outputs the extra line in the reports with your description, right? So explicit status setting has its own benefits. It's up to you if you want to use it or not. But pass is an optional status. So if you have 100 line of code and if they all execute successfully without throwing an error or setting a different status, then it will be considered pass naturally. So this is all about setting pass status. Now what about fail? So fail is the worst outcome you can have with any test case or test unit. So if I set status to fail, there are few interesting thing happens. So let's see what happens, right? So I'm going to execute this test case and let's say run only one test case. So you can see now that first it added this extra line with a fail stamp with your logic. So whatever description you have provided, and the test outcome is fail and the test case outcome is fail, right? So unit failed and as a side effect test case fail as well. What other thing you would notice that every time you set the explicit fail status, you would get this fail stamp. Now, fail stamp is very important for debugging point of view, because if you have a complex test logic, it's possible that the test case have failed in between some lines, right? And figuring out exact line of failure can be sometime hard job, right? Just because you know the test case failed, you still have to debug and find the exact line where bad things happened. So having that fail stamp, it will tell you exactly when things went wrong, right? So it's quite useful. At the same time, when the test case fails, you will also see that there's a test failure highlighter, prints the test case and the test unit in the red color. So user would straight away know that there are some failures, and they can have a quick glance at which unit failed, and as end result which test case failed, right? So failing test has its own side side effects, which you can see in the logs file. Now what happens if someone sets multiple status? So let's say I have few line of code. I'm going to set some status. So I have, let's say, 1, 2, 9 and 3, and I'm going to set fail status, and then someone's going to make it pass again, because when you are writing a logic, you could be calling other function which sets another status, and one other function sets the fail. So there are a few things here, right? So when you are setting a status, the status setting doesn't mean the termination of the test case. So test case will still continue to execute. All these means that now you are telling the test framework that, hey, something happened, please record it. So it records it. And then what happens right at the end, it looks at all the records and finds the worst outcome of all. So for example, here we are setting fail and the pass, and the worst outcome out of 2 is fail, right? Because that's the worst thing can happen to a test case. So what will happen, that the test unit outcome will become fail. Even though you have set the status multiple times, it will take the worst test status and then set as the final outcome. And the same way test case behaves very similarly. So let's say if you have more than one unit, so I'm going to copy paste this unit and call it 2, and let's say that one passes all the time, right? So what will happen, that one test unit is going to fail because of the worst outcome. The second test unit is going to pass because the both outcome is pass, so worst is the pass. And then test case will look at the both of the outcome and look at the worst out of that. So because one is fail and one is pass, the test case will fail because the worst outcome of all units can be failed, right? So let's see if that's true. Now also let me put a sequence here, so unit run in the back order. I will explain sequence in maybe following tutorials, but just bear with me for now. So if I execute this one now, you would see that the first test unit ended up being fail, then second test unit ended up being pass, and the test outcome is still fail, right? So if you look at the summary, 2 test case unit were executed, one of them pass, one of them fail, but because the worst outcome between 2 is fail, the test case failed. So it's quite a hierarchical structure, so user can be notified. And if you look at the failure highlighter, it says these test case fail because of the test unit 1, right? So it's very obvious when you see it. So this is how the test status can provide some useful information. Again, reporting would have the same things logged, whatever you have logged. So if I go back now and look at the logs in the extent report, you would see that they are test unit fail, pass, and that means outcome is fail. And then this is pass, pass, and outcome is pass. So there are 2 test units log status here, and the test case outcome is also fail because of that, right? So test report can also give you quite a good insight, but not too much detail. Now, so now you know how the fail and pass test status works, how to set the test status, how multiple test status affects itself. Now let's talk about the other remaining two status, which is skip and known to fail. So I'm going to uh, delete this unit to just make it simple and delete all these line. So what happens when you set the status skip, and why do you need it in the first place? So you can you can skip the test case by multiple different ways, but what if you don't know that if that test case has to be run for this product or not upfront, right? So what if it has to be dynamically decided? In that case, you need to have a way to mark that as a skip during the execution time. So what you can do, you can run these two line. Let's say you have some logic that checks that if the product is valid for this test case, then it says, hey, if value equals integer value equals to equals to. So let's say we are creating a variable where we are setting the value to, and we are also checking. So let me just make it simple, right? And send correctly. Okay, so let's say we are having an if statement where we are saying if the value equals true, then only execute this line of code. Otherwise, just continue executing for the product, right? In that case, what will happen, that it will end up setting the status equals skip. So we will see in the log file that this case skipped, and you can put a description saying this is invalid case for the product, right? But test case will continue executing to the next line. So to stop from that, you can just call return. In that case, it will stop here, but at least we have a record why we skipped it. So if I now execute, you will see that it will actually print skip and say, hey, I'm skipping it because it's invalid test case for this product, and the outcome is also skipped because there is no other outcome, right? So this is how skip works. So it just helps you notify everyone that, hey, I'm skipping it because of some reason that I figured out during execution time. So that was simple. Let's talk about known to fail. So known to fail is new to everyone because no other test framework that I've seen offers this feature. It's quite a useful feature from my point of view. So what happens that, let's say you have a test case that is failing, right? And your developer says, hey, I'm not gonna fix it because either I don't have time to fix it, or it will be fixed in 10 release after, or maybe it's not worth fixing. So how do you deal with that scenario? Because if they're not gonna fix it, then we only have two ways of dealing with it. Either we let it fail all the time, which is annoying because our failure statistic now has to be adjusted at the end, and we have to always investigate again or remember that this test case is known to fail. Or these, we can change our test logic and make it pass, but that's wrong thing to do as well, because if you pass a logic that is actually meant to fail, then you are doing the wrong thing in the first place. So how do we deal with that? So here is a status called known to fail. So it helps users segregate those known to fail test case into a separate bucket, right? So it doesn't annoy you all the time. So how does it help? That if you are just setting a separate bucket, then how magically it's any more beneficial? So first thing is that is not gonna pollute your fail statistic, because what you see in the failure report is actually fail and you must investigate. But if you set something to known to fail, that means you are saying that, hey, I know that it's failed, but we kind of accepted that it's going to fail for a long time, so you should ideally put some ticket your bug reference number. So I can say, so if I'm using Jira, I should say these fails because of 1, 2, 3, right? So you should put some reference here so users can see why it failed. Now, other thing happens with failed test case is if it never passed, let's say from its inception, you might not have actually finished developing the rest of the logic for that test case. So what happens if developer actually knowingly or unknowingly fixes that? So let's say they were fixing some other bug, and as a side effect, these bug got fixed as well. That means what's gonna happen is now it's not gonna go through this if statement, and the test case will naturally pass. Now that's bad as well. The reason is you might not have finished developing or validating your test logic after that statement, but you now have the test passing, so you will never find out that it actually has a poorly written code, or someone fixed it without closing a Jira ticket or something. So to protect against that, we have introduced a new annotation called known to fail. So if you put that annotation, what you are telling the test framework that hey, this is known to fail unit, so I know that it's known to fail. So if it passes, or if it does anything else but known to fail, then force fail it. So it will force us to investigate again, right? So I know it's a little complicated, but let me maybe reiterate that again. So if you have status known to fail, and if you have annotation known to fail, and if your test ends up with status known to fail, then it's all good, right? Because you said it's known to fail, the status is set is known to fail, then no issue. But if you have annotation known to fail, but if your test case becomes pass or fail, then it would say, hey, that's not known to fail, it's either pass or no fail. That means it's fail. So what will happen that if someone by mistake try to pass this test case, it will actually force fail it, and that way you now have one more test case to investigate that why it failed, right? So that's pretty smart. So that will catch all developers sneakingly fixing some bug and not telling you if they didn't progress their ticket into the right status, and they still give you a build with that fix, or suddenly the failure path has changed, right? Because sometimes what happens, even things are failing, you still want the failure path to be consistent, so you know that it fails that way. But if someone changed the code and now it's failing different way, you want to catch that as well. So these feature can protect you from lots of debugging, and no one can escape from their responsibility. So it's pretty smart from my point of view. Use it or not, it's up to you. If you don't want to enforce the check by the system itself, you can remove this annotation and just set status as known to fail. So you can use it as just a bucket system if you would like to. Either way it works, right? So just to give you an example, let's say I set annotation known to fail, and let's say I try to actually pass the test case. So let's see what happens. So test system's gonna create a guard for me and say, hey, I'm not gonna let this pass. So look, it actually passed, but then system realized that hey, it's supposed to fail, so it prints the fail stem saying, hey, this is meant to fail and it somehow passed, so please look into it. And then it force failed it, right? And that way you can see that now it's not pass or skip or not to fail, it's actually failed test unit, right? But if you actually have it known to fail, then you will see that it actually works correctly. So in that case, you can see that known to fail is expected and it failed as known to fail, so then it's all good. So what happens in the case of skip though? So if someone is trying to skip it, now skip is very special status, right? Skip means you are saying, I'm explicitly telling you that this is maybe not the right test case for this product or software version or whatever. In that case, failing it's not a good idea. So if you have status skip and you have annotation known to fail, then it will still let you skip. So this is the only exception we have, right? And this is for the right reason. So if someone explicitly says skip, then we have to respect that, right? So don't do typo with skip. Everything else, if you do typo, it will catch it for you. So that's the good thing about this system. So now you know all the four status: pass, fail, known to fail, and skip, and how they all work. And you can actually set multiple status, and it will take the worst outcome of all and the hierarchy of the status. So unit has hierarchy of its own, and test case also has a hierarchy of its own, and they all consider the worst outcome out of all. So this is how the test status works in Artos. If you have any more question, please place a comment in the video. If you want to follow on to my next videos and keep yourself up to date, then don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.